let's get straight to business and into the topic. So today we are proposing to cover creating a rock solid message that resonates and differentiates. So maybe before we start getting into this, can you share with us who are the audiences this wisdom and this knowledge is best suited for?
I would say anybody who has to speak with a potential client or a potential customer, they're going to have to ensure that the message that they share with that client resonates with them, but also helps to separate them from their closest competitors. And it's important to note that in most cases, your closest competitor is do nothing, or what's called status quo. So you've got to have a really powerful message in order to persuade a client to consider your solution and hopefully move forward with your solution.
Excellent, thank you. So you obviously see, like, many of us, like all of us, a lot of innovation is going on, a lot of startups, a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of corporations trying to bring new products out there. What are some of the problems you see these startups and these innovators face?
The biggest problem is that the message that they're bringing might seem really good to them, but it doesn't resonate with their client, or it certainly doesn't reach a level where that client is going to reach for their wallet and start providing a lot of dollars to you. And when you're with any company, and especially a startup, you don't have the time to waste with a message that doesn't resonate with that potential customer. You've got to be sure that that message is really strong, and that message will promote or provoke that client taking the next steps with you. And that message has to be driven by the highest levels of the company, and then formatted in a way that everyone in the company can send out that message in a very similar way. Now, of course, it's going to be customized, but it starts with a core message that is really powerful. And that's the biggest problem I see, that the message doesn't start from the top, or even if it does start from the top, it's not a powerful message that really resonates with potential clients.
Excellent. So for you, it's really not about the technology or the product itself, or only about these two things. It's a broader perspective. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit on this? Because a lot of entrepreneurs we see, not all of them, of course, but some of them, will think, oh, I've got a great technology, and customers will come and they will want my technology. But, what are your views on this?
Well, remember, in the world that we're talking about, which is the high-tech healthcare world, they're working with healthcare clients. And at least in the US, and I know it's also true globally, there's not a lot of extra cash. So most hospitals today, most providers today are struggling to keep the doors open. So it's going to be the very rare technology that they decide to move ahead with and spend some of their scarce resources adopting and rolling out in their organization. So because dollars are so tight, it becomes that much more important to really have your act together to be able to talk a really good message to that client, to be able to share with that client how you can really drive value for them.
Excellent. So I look forward to drilling down into the process you go through to create a rock solid message that resonates and differentiates. But before we go there, maybe can you share with us, and I remember because I participated in one of your workshops back then, and that was really great. And I remember you sharing some misconceptions about sales people and sales in general. Can you remind us of what these are?
Oh yes, a couple of them come to mind. The first one is something you just touched upon, which is common with startups. Hey, I've got a really good product, or I've got a really good solution, and so therefore people are going to want to buy it. Well, that's not the case. And we touched upon it a minute ago. You've really got to put yourself into your client's shoes and think like they think, and realize that they've got very limited time, very limited budgets. And is there a way you can crack that and be able to share with them how you can really be a really strategic provider of a unique solution to them to help them with their goals and objectives. That's really what you're trying to do. It's not about having a great bell or whistle, because you can attend the CES show or you can attend HIMSS in a couple months and you'll see thousands of cool products and software and cool technology. It's not enough. You've really got to be different. You've got to think differently and think like your customer thinks. Put yourself in their shoes and be able to drive some powerful value for them. I think another thing that comes to mind is that salespeople are product peddlers, or they go out and they're trying to shove products at customers and all they care about is the sale. And what you'll find is that in today's environment, anyone who sells like that will not be very successful. It really requires a much different, highly consultative approach in order to be successful working with high levels in companies or healthcare providers. You're not going to get any time at all unless you have an approach which is highly consultative and you're really seen as a strategic partner of theirs.
Excellent, excellent. We tend to believe that a salesperson needs to be an extrovert and really outgoing and everything, versus in reality, what you sort of shared with us is that it's really a process. It's a science. You don't need to necessarily, you can even be shy, quote unquote, and still be very successful at selling if you put yourself in the shoes of the customers and you follow this diligent process and science that you've actually developed and you're sharing also in the book, and that you utilize to create this rock solid message that resonates, that differentiates, that influences, that converts this customer from a someone who is interested in buying the product to someone who actually buys the products and for a period of time and repeat sales and so on.
The time is long gone where the outgoing, what I'll call typical sales rep, who's in your face and just trying to push their product and service upon you, those days are long gone. And if you just think of your own personal experience when you're about to go buy something that's important to you, maybe it's a house, maybe it's a car, maybe it's something for your home, most customers are put off by someone who's telling you that they're the best and they're the only one, and you got to buy this and you got to buy this by tomorrow. That used car stereotype, no one has any time for. And that typically would be an outgoing personality. Now, does that mean that someone with an outgoing personality can't be great at sales? No, of course they can be great at sales. I would argue anyone can be great at sales if you know what you're doing. And if you have a heavy dose of, you touched upon it, empathy, where you really care about that customer and you understand how important it is to earn trust with that customer. That really is the key. And executives especially, who've been around a while, can smell when they're near someone who only cares about their own self-interest. But they're very attuned when someone shares valuable information with them, or helps them, or educates them somehow, provides insight, guides them. That's the type of person that people are attached to and they want to work with. And that's the whole premise of my methodology, which is called trust triangle selling. It's really about how do you gain trust with a client, and then after building that trust, guide them on a pathway to mutual success.
We have entrepreneurs who have investors who are putting a lot of pressure on these entrepreneurs, or simply the entrepreneurs are putting this pressure on themselves on their own to drive revenue. They have to grow their businesses. A lot of startups fail, and we want to help them cross this chasm, grow their business, create jobs, and so that everyone can, live happy lives. There's a bigger mission behind all this, but how do you get this going? How do you get your product to sell, and how do you create that rock solid message that resonates, differentiates, and ends up in revenue?
Great. That's the magical question. If I'm a startup, that is the key question, because with the pressure they're under, there's not a lot of time to mess around. They've got to hit the road running, and there's no opportunity for missteps. And then I would argue, and certainly I might be biased, but I'd love your opinion on this as well. What is more important for a CEO or the principal of a new startup to be able to respond to the question, hey, what is it that you do? How can you help me? If they don't have a really strong answer to that, and they haven't thought that out, and that's not strategic, and they haven't put that in a little package called the value proposition that they then can share with others in their organization, I would argue they're not on a pathway to success. I would argue there's nothing more important for that CEO and that company than to have a really strong value proposition. That's really key.
Yep, and so I'm completely aligned with you, and that's the $1 million question, because it's very hard for entrepreneurs to actually come up with such statement. And sometimes we see these statements, you know, on big companies like you know, Sanofi or Novartis or Stryker, and it seems so simple, yet they spend years or months, you know, and millions in getting these statements right. So a startup doesn't have that level of cash, of resources. So how can you bridge that gap and still come up with a great value proposition, great message, mission statement? What's the steps you would typically take to start?
Yes, I've boiled it down. I've done so many of these now that it has really become second nature. It's a simple recipe. I've boiled it down into a 5-step recipe, and I'm going to share with you the 5 key components of a really strong value proposition. Excellent. And I'm going to draw an analogy to you to the first iPhone that I ever had. I pulled out of the little box and I was shocked at how simple it was to operate this iPhone. And I'm going to then make that correlation to the value proposition. The beauty of a value proposition is how simple it is. If everyone on your team who touches a customer does not have the value proposition memorized, then I would argue there really isn't room on the bus, if you will, for that individual. You must be able to have the value proposition of your company memorized if you're going to be interacting with clients. Now it's incumbent upon the CEO or the leader of marketing and the CEO to create a rock solid value proposition that is so simple and so easy. It reminds you of the iPhone when you pull it out of the box. It's just simple. And the way I make it simple is with those 5 components of the value proposition. A, B, C, D, E, simple as that. It just flows beautifully.
In the value proposition, do you also incorporate, you know, the mission statement of the company, the vision?
Well, remember that those are extremely important for the CEO to have their hands around. I'm talking about something different now. I'm talking about the direct go to customer messaging, which may incorporate pieces of what you mentioned, the vision, the mission of the company. But as a customer, I don't care about your vision and mission. Why? I'm trying to keep the doors open of my organization. So yeah, is it nice to have a cool vision and mission? But to me, don't care about that. I'm really interested in what can you do for me? How can you help me improve my costs, improve my productivity, reduce my costs, drive more revenue for me, improve outcomes, things like that. That's what I care about.
What are the 5 elements of a robust value proposition?
It starts with a high-level promise, and the high-level promise really is entitled or intended to help when a customer says, what is it that you can do for me? A very simple question. And the high-level promise is then 1 sentence, really tight sentence that allows you to say, we can provide value for you in this manner. And it's just 1 sentence. It's not a paragraph or it's not 3 pages of text. And it starts with, we can assist you with blah, 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 blah. We help you to drive improved outcomes and lowering the cost of care. That would be an example of a high-level promise. It's very big and very broad. And the idea is to get someone's attention because in the healthcare world, they're really concerned about what's called the triple aim. And the triple aim is improving costs, improving outcomes, improving the patient experience, which is related to outcomes, and then what's called population health. Those are the three, what's called the triple aim, the three most important things that senior executives in healthcare care about. So you'd expect that if you're working into the provider side of healthcare, your high-level promise would touch upon those three, one of those three, or a couple of those three things. By the way, there's a fourth component called the quadruple aim, is what some people are now talking about. And that fourth component is, how can you help me to improve the daily life and the experience that my own employees in my healthcare organization have, because burnout is so big. So that's the first component, the promise. The next component of the recipe, if you will, is the enabler. And the enabler answers the customer's question of, hey, what exactly do you offer? Do you offer chairs or tables, or do you come and paint my walls? No, you have to very succinctly, in one or two sentences, share with a client exactly what it is that you do. Now, you don't have to talk about what makes you unique or how cool you are. We're not at that point yet. You simply share with the customer that we offer, let's say, for an example, an end-to-end portfolio of services to assist you with, pick a topic, engaging new patients who come in the organization, or we help you to improve your discharge rates with a end-to-end series of products and software and services. So just so that the customer has an idea of what you're offering, that's the idea of the enabler, which is number 2. So now we're on to number 3. You've got the customer's attention. Hey, I'm interested in what you're offering. Now the question the customer is going to ask very logically would be, well, what makes you unique? Because I just spoke with someone who also is involved in that exact same business. They offer improvement in my patient discharge rates, or a reduction in revisits to our organization. So how is it that you can help me, and how do you differentiate? Now, this is the area where you provide what's called your unique competitive advantages, or it's sometimes called my unfair advantages. And here's where I work with clients to list the top 2 or 3 or 4 max unique competitive advantages. So these are things that your company offers that absolutely no one else offers. I want to know, what is it that you offer? Why should I care? So that's called the feature and the benefit. So you list those 2 or 3 or 4, and I'll make a note here that when I work with clients, they typically will, on first pass, provide 8 unique competitive advantages. And then when I proof test each one of the 8, we typically end up with about 2 or 3. Why? Because the 8 are not truly unique. In order to make this list, you better be sure that you're offering something that no one else can. It's got to truly be a unique competitive advantage. And so when I ask them, hey, are there any competitors who offer the same features? Sometimes I hear, oh yeah, they do. It's just not as good. Well, it doesn't make the list. And it's really, really important that you never put on this list something that really isn't unique. And the reason is, if we train our sales team or our senior executives to go speak with investors, or we speak with potential clients, and they share with a client that they offer something, and that client later finds out it's really not unique when the company said it was unique, now we've got a huge issue, a trust issue. And another example where a salesman is lying, and certainly in my methodology or my approach, there's no room for any gray area about talking about something that's not true. And I like to give the quote, trust arrives on foot but flees on horseback. And what that means is trust is very hard to build. And all you have to do is twist it just a little bit, or go into a gray area just a little bit, and you'll blow all the trust. So we can't do that. So once again, the third component that we're talking about of the value proposition is your unique competitive advantages. I want to know, what is it that you have that's truly unique, and what is the benefit? So that completes the first 3. Now we're on to number 4. Number 4 is the most difficult. And you mentioned a minute ago that it's probably the most difficult when you work with your clients on the messaging early on, and that is, how do you quantify your uniqueness? So here's what's called the justification component of your value proposition. It's number 4 on the list of 5 things of your value proposition. And the justification is, tell me why I should spend more for your product than anyone else, or with my status quo with what I'm doing now. So here's where the Excel spreadsheet comes out, and you have to justify over a series of years, potentially 3 to 5 years, using something called net present value or some of our mathematical formulas that help a customer see the financial benefit of investing in your offering. We're looking for not only financial benefits in healthcare, but we have another benefit that we can offer only in healthcare, and that is benefits with regard to outcomes. How can you improve outcomes? And outcomes, of course, is the fancy word for quality in healthcare. But in addition to the financial justification, we can also look for improvement in outcomes when you're looking at the justification section of a product or service or solution intended for the healthcare world. But I'll just reiterate, it's difficult. This is the most difficult section to really put a pencil to paper to help the CFO of an organization you're selling into to show him or her why they should invest with you as a result of the financial benefit that will be derived from your offering. It is extremely important, especially with tight dollars in healthcare today. That brings me to the final and 5th component of a really strong message or value proposition, and that's proof. And what is proof? Proof is to respond to the customer who says, I don't believe you. I understand that you have a great service, great product. I understand what you do. I understand what makes you unique. And I understand that you just told me that I can save $15 million per year. But you know what? After hearing all that, I don't believe you. So the proof section is where you buttress all of your key points, your unique competitive advantages, your justification with proof. And what is proof? What's the definition of proof in the value proposition? It's analogies, it's stories, it's quotations, it's white papers, anything by a third party, unbiased, highly credible document or quote where it will justify what you've said with a lot of credibility. So those are the 5 components. One more time: promise, enabler, unique competitive advantage, justification, and proof. And although those 5 seem super simple, the beauty is in how smoothly and simply you can combine those into a very tight document that's less than 1 page that then can be taught to every member of the team who interfaces with a client.
Excellent. Dan, I can't wait to share this with the rest of our alumni and entrepreneurs. This is really helpful. Anything else, Dan, you would like to share about some advice for entrepreneurs, for innovators, for startups?
If I was set to start a business tomorrow, step 1, value proposition. Really creating a rock solid value proposition that resonates and differentiates my company. There's nothing more important. That really has to be the very first thing. Once you've got the solution that you think is better than anyone else and you're ready to go get funding, as a part of the discussion with investors and as you're initially speaking with customers, what are you going to tell these people? You can't afford to misstep here. When you're working with investors and customers, especially at high levels in organizations, you got to have your act together. And when I say you have your act together, what I'm talking about, you better have that talk track down. And that talk track is fundamentally that strong value proposition. And it's really important. And I'm not sure I mentioned this earlier, but once you get the 5 components of that value proposition locked and loaded, and you have it memorized as a condition of employment, it is never, ever utilized in its memorized form. One more time, the value proposition must be memorized as a condition of employment. That's why it's got to be really short and sweet and tight. But it will never be used in its memorized form because it will be cut and pasted into a discussion with the appropriate client at the right time. So it's always customized, but you'll take bits and pieces out of it to work with your clients or investors, whoever you're speaking with.
Excellent, excellent. And I think it's very key what you're saying, because large sums are being invested in innovation, in R&D, and more the question of marketing, the question of value proposition is coming at the earlier stage to reduce waste in these investments actually. So currently we're seeing a big trend where governments, but also investors, business angels as a whole, are really asking more about what's the solution you're bringing, what's the value proposition you're offering, versus you're working on something on blockchain or that fancy technology to really find out the real products, the real value that can be unlocked. So this is very, very interesting, and I can't wait to share this wisdom and knowledge with the rest of the team here.
Yeah, that makes sense. Before investment is made in a company, I want to know what you're going to use those dollars for. And are those dollars going to be directly impacting my value proposition? For example, I want you to be investing money that allows you to come up with one other unique competitive advantage. So yeah, I think that's right on point.
Excellent. Thank you, Dan. And so to finish the podcast for today, in the book, so what can people expect, and who would be the audience for this book called Building Trust and Growing Sales? And what can people find in it?
I would say anyone who is disappointed with the current approach to selling, which is typically facts, features, benefit, we're the best, here's what I can do, no one else can do it, blah, blah, blah. If they're looking for something different and they want to know what the best of the best do, people who are working with senior executives and are very, very successful, beating quota every year, what are the best practices that they use? What is the methodology that can really differentiate me in the eyes of my customer? Do I want my customer thinking of me as a typical sales rep, or do I want my customer looking at me as a strategic advisor, someone who's educating me, someone who's providing insight to me, someone who really cares about what my goals are? If that's your goal, then this is a book that I think that the reader would find very valuable. It's really packed with unique best practices and approaches that will help to differentiate that sales rep in the eyes of their customer.
Excellent. Yeah, and definitely a book I recommend. There's a lot of templates, tools, and it's very technical, very applicable. It's not fluff. It's really a real life experience, expertise that can be applied to these type of sales process and complex sales. So congratulations for the book.
Great, thanks.
Thank you, Dan. So this completes today's podcast, unless maybe you want to share any more elements before we close.
Yes, there's a couple of things that I'd like to just touch upon. First is, who is the book not intended for? Well, you have to realize it came out of my experience, and my experience is in working with educated customers in the high-tech healthcare world, big ticket clients who are making big investments that typically are complex. So if you're selling something that is a very low sale price and does not require access to senior executives and is a one sales call type approach, this book would probably not be for that person. This is a much more high level approach to selling.
Thank you, Dan.